I was born in 1970 in a quiet Vermont town where people prided themselves on knowing everyone's secrets except their own. My name is Elena Harrison, and if you asked my family about me, they'd probably tell you I was ungrateful, that I caused nothing but trouble. But the truth is, all I ever did was refuse to lie. The text came at dawn. Miss Elena Harrison, you are required to attend the reading of Ruth Harrison's last will and testament today at 2 p.m. This is an urgent matter. I read it over and over, trying to convince myself it was real. My grandmother had been gone for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of silence, of closed doors, of realizing that the people I grew up with could erase me so easily. They planned her funeral without me. They buried her without a single phone call. All because on one Thanksgiving afternoon, I finally said out loud what everyone else pretended not to see. I stood outside the lawyer's office with my hand on the door handle, my heart hammering. I knew the moment I walked in, every face would turn to me with the same look: contempt. Have you ever felt that? Have you ever walked into a room full of people who once called you family, only to see that you were now nothing but an inconvenience, a reminder of truths they'd rather keep buried? If you have, I hope you'll share your story below. Someone out there might need to hear they're not alone. Stay with me, because what happened behind that door changed everything. The door swung open and there they were, all of them. My Uncle Victor sat at the head of the polished conference table, tapping his fingers in that impatient way he'd always had. Aunt Diane glanced up, her face carefully composed. She looked me over like I was a stain she couldn't scrub out. My cousins Lisa, Aaron, Melissa barely looked up from their phones. I stepped inside. The air felt 10 degrees colder. No one spoke. Victor was the first to break the silence. His voice was sharp, like it always was when he wanted to make sure everyone knew he was in charge. "What is she doing here?" he demanded, as if I couldn't hear him. I held up my phone with the text. My hand didn't shake, but it felt numb. "I was invited," I said, my voice soft. Lisa pushed back her chair so hard it scraped the floor. She glared at me like I'd shown up to steal something. "You weren't supposed to be here," she hissed. "You lost the right." Mr. Caldwell, the lawyer, cleared his throat. He looked older than I remembered, but his eyes were kind. "I invited her," he said gently. "It's my legal duty. Have you ever stood in a place you once felt safe, only to realize you were surrounded by people waiting to tear you apart? If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. Feel free to share a memory in the comments, or just take a breath and stay with me. This story is far from over." I took a seat near the far end of the table. No one offered a greeting. No one even pretended to smile. Aunt Diane pulled a folder into her lap. She smoothed the cover with careful fingers like she was about to deliver a sermon. "You all know," she began, her voice so calm it felt rehearsed, "that Mother was confused toward the end. She didn't always know what she was signing." I looked up. My chest felt tight. "That's not true," I said quietly. "She was sharper than any of you. She knew exactly what she wanted." Victor scoffed. He didn't look at me. He stared at the far wall as if I wasn't worth the effort. "Mother made it clear," he said, "that you were no longer part of this family after what you did." I almost laughed, but the sound caught in my throat. "What I did?" I whispered. "You mean telling the truth? You mean refusing to pretend everything you did was normal?" Lisa folded her arms. She looked bored. Aaron kept his eyes on his phone like none of this mattered. Mr. Caldwell's gaze moved around the room. He looked tired, but when he spoke, his voice was steady. "Mrs. Harrison updated her will 6 weeks ago," he said. "I was present, and she was fully competent. Have you ever watched people realize their lies were about to crumble? If you've seen that moment when a secret can't be hidden anymore, feel free to share your thoughts below, or simply stay here with me." The truth was about to come out. Mr. Caldwell reached into his briefcase. He pulled out a thick envelope sealed with a blue ribbon. For clarity, he said, his voice calm, "Mrs. Harrison included a recording. She wanted her intentions to be undeniable." He set a small laptop on the table. The screen flickered to life, and then I saw her. Grandma's face filled the screen. She looked tired but strong. She was wearing the cardigan I'd given her last Christmas, the one Aunt Diane claimed she threw away. "Hello, my dear ones," she began. Her voice was soft, but it carried a weight that made everyone fall silent. "If you're watching this," she said, "I'm gone, and you're probably ready to pick apart whatever I left behind." Victor shifted in his chair. Diane's mouth tightened. "I want to be clear," Grandma continued. Elena was never the problem. The problem was your greed. I felt my eyes burn. I pressed my hand against my chest to steady my breathing. You lied about her, Grandma said, her gaze steady on the camera. You tried to keep her away from me, but she was the only one brave enough to tell me the truth. No one moved. No one even breathed. Have you ever heard someone defend you when you weren't there to defend yourself? If you have, you know how it feels. Like someone finally saw you. Stay with me. What she said next changed everything I thought I knew. Grandma's voice filled the room again. To Victor, she said, I leave my collection of old pamphlets, all the proof of your investment schemes. Victor's face turned pale. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. To Diane, Grandma continued, I leave the empty offering plate you stole from the church. Aunt Diane's hand trembled. She clutched the folder in her lap like it could shield her. To Aaron, she said, I leave the brochures for addiction recovery. May you use them before it's too late. Aaron finally looked up. His eyes were dark and full of something like fear. To Melissa, Grandma went on, I leave the canceled credit cards you opened in my name. Melissa swallowed hard. She turned away from the screen. And to Lisa, Grandma said, her voice so calm it hurt, I leave my real scarf. Not the fake you tried to sell. I watched them all shrink in their chairs. They looked so small. Then her gaze softened. And to Elena, she said, I leave everything else. The house, the accounts, the security I wanted for you. I covered my mouth. My heart was beating so fast it felt like it might break. Have you ever been given something you didn't ask for, but so badly needed? If you've ever had that moment when love becomes your shelter, feel free to share it below. Stay with me, because in that moment, I knew I was finally free. For a long moment, no one spoke. I sat very still, trying to take it in. My grandmother had left everything to me. Victor finally found his voice. It was rough and full of rage. This is a joke, he snapped. A stunt. We'll contest this. Every word. Mr. Caldwell didn't flinch. He simply clicked the laptop again. The screen shifted. Grandma's face reappeared. Her expression was so calm, it almost made me cry. I know you'll try to challenge this, she said. I expected nothing less. The camera panned to a wall. It was covered in photos, documents, and receipts. Victor leaned forward. His skin turned gray. Here is proof, Grandma continued. Proof of everything. The lies, the theft, the schemes. Diane made a choking sound. Lisa pressed her hand over her mouth. I hired someone, Grandma said. A professional. He followed you for months. My breath caught. I had never known she'd done this. If you contest my wishes, Grandma finished. This evidence goes to the authorities. The video ended. No one moved. Have you ever watched people realize the game was over, that all their secrets were suddenly out in the open? If you've witnessed that moment when the truth finally wins, feel free to share. You might help someone else find courage. Stay with me, because there was still one last thing I had to say. I looked around the table, at every face that had once been so familiar, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not triumph, just a quiet release. Victor started to speak again, but I held up my hand. My voice came out steady. I don't want this to be about revenge, I said. I didn't ask for any of this. Lisa glared at me. Her eyes were bright with hate. You think you're better than us? She whispered. I shook my head. No, I said, but I know I'm not like you. Mr. Caldwell cleared his throat. He slid a small envelope across the table. Your grandmother left you a personal letter, he said softly. I took it with both hands. My fingers brushed the familiar handwriting. My heart felt too big for my chest. She believed in you, Mr. Caldwell added. She said you were the only one she trusted. I swallowed hard. For the first time in years, I felt safe. Have you ever been given a chance to start over, to finally breathe without fear? If you have, you know how precious that gift can be. Stay here with me, because this is where my story truly begins. I held the envelope against my chest. For a second, I couldn't bring myself to open it. It felt like touching something alive, like she was still here just beyond the door. Finally, I broke the seal. My grandmother's handwriting was as elegant as ever, each letter looped with care. My dearest Elena, if you are reading this, then you know everything. You know how they tried to shut you out, how they lied about you, how they convinced themselves that money mattered more than love. I closed my eyes. My throat tightened. I want you to understand something she wrote. This is not about punishing them. This is about freeing you. For too long, you carried the weight of their cruelty. You tried to be good, to be patient, to prove you were worthy of respect. But my darling, you were always worthy. I took a shaky breath. This inheritance isn't theirs to claim. It's mine. It's what I built, what I saved, what I chose to give to you. Use it well. Use it to build something that lasts longer than all their greed. My hand was trembling as I turned to the last lines, and if you ever doubt yourself, remember this. Sometimes the black sheep is simply the one who refuses to be silent. Have you ever needed someone to say the words you couldn't find yourself? If you have, you'll understand why this letter felt like a lifeline. Stay with me. Because that moment marked the start of everything new. I folded the letter carefully, slipped it back into the envelope. When I looked up, every eye was on me. Some were furious, some were cold, but not a single one showed regret. Victor pushed his chair back. The legs scraped across the floor. He didn't bother to hide his disgust. "You think this is over?" he asked. His voice was low, flat. I met his stare. For the first time, I didn't feel small. "Yes," I said simply. "I do." Diane's lip curled. "You'll be alone," she spat. "Every holiday, every wedding. No one will stand beside you." I smiled just a little. "I've already been alone," I told her. "At least now it's by choice." Melissa let out a harsh laugh. Aaron didn't look at me at all. He was already reaching for his phone. Mr. Caldwell began gathering the papers. He moved slowly as if he wanted to give me time. "Your grandmother asked me to remind you," he said, "that you don't owe them anything." I nodded. My heart felt strangely light. Have you ever walked away from something that no longer served you? If you have, you know, it takes more courage than most people can see. Stay with me. There was one last thing I needed to do before I left. I stood. My knees felt steady. My voice was clear. For the record, I said, "I don't wish any of you harm." Lisa rolled her eyes. "But I'm done pretending," I continued. "Done hoping you'd ever treat me like family." No one interrupted me. Maybe they knew there was nothing left to say. I picked up the letter, slid it into my bag. Mr. Caldwell handed me a final document, a receipt for the estate transfer. His hand was warm against mine. "Your grandmother believed you'd do good things with this," he said quietly. I nodded. I couldn't trust my voice. One by one, they turned away. Victor muttering under his breath, Diane staring at the wall. Lisa blinking back angry tears she'd never admit to. I walked to the door. My heart was thumping in my chest. But it wasn't fear. It was relief. Have you ever felt that moment when you step out of a place that tried to break you and realize you're finally whole? If you have, you know what freedom feels like. Stay with me. Because this was not an ending. It was the first day of the life I chose for myself. I stepped out into the hallway. The door closed behind me with a soft click. For a moment, I just stood there, my hand resting on the worn wood. I expected to feel anger, or regret, maybe even sadness, but all I felt was a strange, quiet peace. I thought about all the years I'd tried to belong, the dinners where no one looked me in the eye, the whispered stories about how I'd betrayed them, and I realized I didn't need any of it anymore. I didn't need to prove that I was loyal, or worthy, or good enough to sit at their table. Grandma knew the truth. That was all that mattered. I turned and walked toward the elevator. My steps felt lighter than they had in years. When the doors opened, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirrored panel. I looked tired, but I also looked unafraid. Have you ever seen your own reflection and realized you were finally becoming who you were meant to be? If you have, you'll understand why I smiled. Stay with me. Because the next thing I did changed everything. As I reached the lobby, my phone buzzed in my bag. For a second, I thought about ignoring it. I didn't want their voices in my ear. Not today, but curiosity won. I slipped it out and glanced at the screen. A message. Not from Victor, not from Diane. It was from Mrs. Reynolds, one of Grandma's oldest friends. "Elena, I heard what happened. She would be so proud of you." I felt something tighten in my chest, a feeling I hadn't known in a long time. Belonging. I typed a reply with hands that were still a little shaky. "Thank you. I wasn't sure I did the right thing." A moment later, she wrote back, "You did. She knew you were the only one brave enough to tell the truth." I pressed my lips together. blinked fast to keep the tears back. Have you ever needed just one voice to say you were right, that you weren't wrong for standing up? If you have, you know how powerful that small kindness can be. Stay with me, because that message gave me the courage to take my next step. I walked out into the afternoon light. It was brighter than I expected. I crossed the sidewalk to my old car, the one everyone laughed at behind my back. I didn't care. I opened the door, slid inside, and set the letter in the passenger seat. My hands rested on the steering wheel for a moment. I thought about Grandma's voice, about the way she'd said my name, like she'd never doubted who I was. I started the engine. It hummed to life, steady and familiar. As I pulled away from the curb, I felt something lift off my shoulders. All the shame, all the fear, all the desperate need to be accepted. It was gone. Have you ever driven away from a place and felt deep in your bones that you were finally free? If you have, you know how it feels when the road ahead belongs only to you. Stay here with me, because this was just the beginning of the life I promised her I would build. The road stretched out in front of me, long, open. I drove past the little white church where Grandma used to volunteer. The steps were cracked now, the paint peeling in places, but I could still picture her standing there, holding a basket of fresh bread, smiling at every person who came by. She never cared about their past or their mistakes. She always said everyone deserved dignity. I thought about her words. Elena, you don't have to let them decide who you are. You don't have to wear their shame. You only have to tell the truth and stand by it. I gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. In that moment, I knew she hadn't just left me money or a house. She had left me the freedom to start over, without begging for approval I would never get. I slowed the car as I reached a stop sign. Have you ever heard a voice in your memory that gave you strength you didn't know you had? If you have, you know why. I took a deep breath. Stay with me. Because the next turn I took felt like crossing into a new life. I pulled onto Maple Street. The trees were tall here, their branches met overhead. For a moment I felt like I was driving through a green tunnel. At the end of the block stood the house. My grandmother's house. Now, my house. It looked exactly the same. White siding, blue shutters, the porch swing where we'd spent so many evenings. I parked by the curb. My hands rested in my lap as I stared at the front door. I remembered every holiday, every quiet afternoon, and I remembered the last time I'd been here, the day they served me with a restraining order. My chest tightened, but I didn't look away. This was my home now, not theirs. I opened the car door and stepped out. The gravel crunched under my shoes. I walked up the steps slowly. Each one felt like letting go of something heavy. Have you ever returned to a place that once broke your heart and realized it couldn't hurt you anymore? If you have, you know why I finally reached for the key in my pocket. Stay here with me. Because stepping inside felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I paused at the top step. The key felt warm in my hand, as if she were there beside me, urging me on. For a second, I closed my eyes, let the memories wash over me. Her laughter, the smell of fresh coffee, the quiet understanding that I was loved here no matter what anyone said. I opened my eyes, slipped the key into the lock, turned it. The door swung open with a soft creak. Sunlight spilled across the old wooden floor. Dust motes drifted in the air. I stepped inside. My heart beat slow and steady. Everything looked the same, but it felt different. I wasn't a guest anymore. I wasn't an intruder. I was home. Have you ever crossed a threshold and felt your past finally loosen its grip? If you have, you understand why I stood there so long, just breathing, just feeling. Stay with me, because this was the moment I promised myself I would never look back. I set my bag down by the door. For a long moment, I didn't move. The house was so quiet, the kind of quiet that feels alive, like it's waiting to see what you'll do next. I walked slowly into the living room. My shoes made soft sounds on the floor. Everything was just as she'd left it. The old armchair by the window, the blue blanket folded neatly on the back, the little glass bowl where she kept wrapped candies for visitors. I reached out and touched the arm of the chair. It was worn smooth. I could almost feel her sitting there, reading, humming to herself. A wave of something warm and painful rose up in my chest. I sat down carefully, my hands rested in my lap, and for the first time in weeks, I let myself cry. The tears came slow, heavy, but they felt clean. Have you ever needed to sit in a familiar place and let your heart finally say everything you'd held back? If you have, you know how it feels to grieve and heal all at once? Stay with me. Because in that quiet, I started to see what my life could become. When the tears slowed, I looked around the room again. My gaze fell on the small table by the front door. There was an envelope propped against the lamp, my name written across the front in her careful script. I stood up slowly, walked over, picked it up with both hands. I knew what it was. Her last words to me. I carried it back to the armchair, sat down again. The paper was smooth under my fingertips, the ink a little faded. For a moment, I couldn't bring myself to open it. Then I took a deep breath, slid my thumb under the flap. My dearest Elena, if you are reading this, it means you have come home. I always knew you would. I swallowed hard. The lump in my throat felt too big to speak around. I hope this house feels safe again. I hope it reminds you that you were always loved. Never doubt that. Have you ever read words so gentle they made you ache in a way you didn't expect? If you have, you know why. I pressed the letter to my heart. Stay here with me because she left me more than memories. She left me a reason to keep going. I read the rest of the letter slowly. You have a good heart, she wrote. Don't let anyone convince you it's a weakness. Use what I've left you to do something kind, something lasting. And if you ever feel alone, remember love doesn't vanish. It waits. It keeps the door open. I wiped my cheek. My eyes felt raw, but lighter. I folded the letter carefully, set it in my lap. I looked around the room one more time. This was my place now, my story to write. I thought about the people who would never understand, the ones who would always say I didn't deserve any of it. And I realized it didn't matter. I knew the truth. She knew the truth. That was enough. Have you ever felt that quiet certainty, the moment you stop needing permission to belong? If you have, you know why. I finally smiled. Stay with me. Because that was the day I promised myself I would never again be afraid of who I was. That evening, I stayed in the house. I didn't turn on the television or the radio. I just let the silence wrap around me like a blanket. I made tea in the old blue kettle, the one she'd used every morning. The kitchen still smelled faintly of her, like cinnamon and soap. I carried my cup into the living room, sat in her chair again, and I watched the light fade from the walls. Outside, the street grew dark. Porch lights blinked on one by one. I thought about how many nights she must have sat in this same spot, watching the world get quiet. I wondered if she ever felt lonely, or if she knew that one day I would need this place more than I could ever admit. I sipped my tea slowly. Every sip felt like an echo of her voice telling me it was all right to rest. Have you ever spent an evening alone and realized you were finally safe? If you have, you know why I stayed there long after the cup was empty. Stay with me. Because that night was when I knew I was strong enough to begin again. I woke early, the sun just beginning to slip through the curtains. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then I remembered, and my heart didn't hurt. I sat up in bed, looked around the room, the same quilt, the same wooden dresser. But it felt different, like it had been waiting for me to come back and claim it. I got dressed slowly, pulled my hair back. I walked into the kitchen. The floor creaked under my feet. I set the kettle on the stove again, and as the water heated, I felt something I hadn't in years. Hope. It wasn't loud or bright, just a quiet little spark. Have you ever woken up and realized the worst part of your story was finally over? If you have, you know why I closed my eyes and took a slow breath. Stay here with me. Because that morning was when I decided I would make something good out of everything I'd been given. After breakfast, I walked through every room. I opened the curtains. Let the light flood in. I opened the windows. Let the fresh air sweep away the old shadows. I stood in the doorway of the spare bedroom, and I thought about the nonprofit I'd always dreamed of starting. A place to help people like Mrs. Reynolds, the ones my Uncle Victor had cheated. I felt my heart beat faster. I could do it now. I had the means, the space, the reason. I took out a small notebook, sat at the kitchen table, and I wrote the first lines of a plan. Each word felt like building a new foundation, one that couldn't be torn down by bitterness or lies. Have you ever taken the first step towards something that scared you but also felt exactly right? If you have, you know why I didn't stop writing until my hand began to ache. Stay with me. because this was the moment my story stopped being about survival and started being about purpose. When my hand finally grew tired, I set the pen down. I looked out the window over the sink. The sun had climbed higher. Warm light spilled across the counter. I thought about Grandma, about the way she used to stand in this very spot. She would hum softly while she washed the dishes. Sometimes she'd turn and catch me watching her. She'd smile and say, "One day you'll understand, Elena. One day you'll see that love isn't something you earn. It's something you carry." I never really understood what she meant. Not back then. But sitting here now in the house she left me, I finally did. I didn't have to keep proving I was good enough. I didn't have to keep fighting for their approval. I already had what mattered most. Her faith in me, her belief that I could turn pain into something better. Have you ever remembered a promise someone made to you and realized it was exactly what you needed to keep going? If you have, you know why I sat there so long just letting the memory fill the room. Stay with me, because I was ready to take the next step. Later that afternoon, I picked up my phone. I scrolled past all the old messages, the ones full of threats, the ones full of lies. I didn't open them. I didn't need to. Instead, I found the number for Mrs. Reynolds. My thumb hovered over the screen for a moment. Then I pressed call. It rang twice before she answered. "Elena," she said. Her voice was warm, surprised. "It's me," I said. My own voice felt steadier than I expected. I wanted to tell you I'm here now. I'm in the house." There was a pause. I heard her take a breath. "She would be so proud of you," she said softly. "You know that, don't you?" I closed my eyes. "Yes," I whispered. I think I finally do." Have you ever told someone you were all right, even when you weren't sure yet? If you have, you know how brave that moment can feel. Stay here with me, because talking to her reminded me I wasn't alone. After I hung up, I stood by the window for a long time. I watched the neighbors walk by, a man walking his dog, a woman carrying groceries. No one looked up at the house. No one knew how much had happened behind these walls, and that felt strangely comforting. I didn't owe anyone my story. It was mine to keep, or share, mine to shape into something new. I took a slow breath. In that quiet kitchen, I felt something shift inside me, a small sense of victory. Not because I had won some fight over money, but because I had walked through every accusation, every cruel word, every attempt to break me, and I was still here. Have you ever felt that quiet triumph the moment you knew you'd survived what was meant to destroy you? If you have, you understand why I finally smiled. Stay with me, because I had only just begun to discover what freedom really looked like. The next morning, I decided to step outside. The garden behind the house had grown wild. Tall grass brushed against my legs as I walked the narrow path, but I didn't mind. Everywhere I looked, there were small signs of her, the clay pots lined up on the porch rail, the faded wind chime that tinkled in the breeze. I paused by the old rose bush. She had planted it when I was a child. She used to say, "Even the thorns have a purpose, Elena. They protect the beauty." I bent down, touched one of the blossoms. It was still soft, still alive, and so was I. I stood there for a long moment, letting the morning sun warm my shoulders. I wasn't sure what the future would look like, but for the first time in years, that uncertainty didn't scare me. Have you ever stood in a place that held so many memories and felt them all gently settle around you without pain? If you have, you know why I took that slow breath. Stay here with me, because this was the moment I knew I was ready to start again. I went back inside, picked up the small notebook I'd started the day before. I sat at the kitchen table, the same place she used to sit and pay her bills, the same place she'd write birthday cards in her perfect cursive. I turned to a fresh page. At the top, I wrote a simple heading, "Things I Will Do." For a moment, I stared at the words. They felt so ordinary, but they were more powerful than any accusation or threat. They were mine. One by one, I started to list them. Set up the nonprofit, call the bank, repair the porch steps, plant new flowers by the front walk. Every line felt like claiming my life back piece by piece. I didn't rush. I let each word settle into the page. Have you ever made a list, not out of obligation, but because you finally believed you deserved good things? If you have, you know why my hand didn't shake when I put the pen down. Stay with me, because I was ready to do every single thing I'd promised myself. Late that afternoon, there was a knock at the door. I froze. My first thought was that it might be Victor or Diane, coming to demand what they believed was theirs. But when I peeked through the window, I saw someone else. Mrs. Reynolds stood on the porch. She held a small basket in both hands. I opened the door slowly. "Hello, Elena," she said, her voice warm. "I thought you might like a little company." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Then I stepped back and nodded. "Please come in," I whispered. She crossed the threshold like she'd done it 100 times, set the basket on the table. "Tea?" she asked, already moving to fill the kettle. I felt my throat tighten. Have you ever been surprised by kindness at the exact moment you needed it most? If you have, you understand why I blinked fast and looked away. "Stay here with me." Because that cup of tea turned into something much bigger. We sat at the kitchen table. The kettle hissed on the stove. Mrs. Reynolds poured the tea with hands that never seemed to tremble. She set a cup in front of me. Then she looked around the room. "It hasn't changed much," she said softly. "Your grandmother loved this house." I nodded. She made it feel like the one place I was never in the way. Mrs. Reynolds reached across the table. Her fingers rested lightly on my hand. "She loved you more than you can imagine," she said. I felt tears prick at my eyes again. I didn't look away. "I always thought if I tried hard enough, the others would see me the way she did," I whispered. She sighed. "Some people can't see past their own fear," she said. "No matter what you do." I closed my eyes. Her words felt like a balm I hadn't known I needed. Have you ever sat with someone who understood your grief without asking you to explain it? If you have, you know why I finally let the tears come. Stay with me. Because that simple moment changed how I saw everything that happened. After a while, the kettle went quiet. I wiped my eyes. Mrs. Reynolds sipped her tea and looked out the window. "Do you remember she began the summer your grandmother painted the porch?" I smiled, though my cheeks were still damp. "She let me pick the color," I said. "Everyone thought it was too bright." Mrs. Reynolds chuckled, "But she told them it was your choice, that you had an eye for what would make people feel welcome." I felt my throat tighten again. "I forgot about that," I said. "You shouldn't," she told me gently. "She wanted you to feel at home, to know your voice mattered." I looked around the kitchen. Every corner held some small reminder of her faith in me. The bright paint, the old blue kettle, the letter she'd left behind. Have you ever remembered something small and realized it was proof that you were loved all along? If you have, you understand why I felt stronger than I had in years. Stay here with me, because I was ready to honor her in ways no one could take from me. When Mrs. Reynolds stood to leave, I walked her to the door. The afternoon light had turned golden. She turned and looked at me carefully. "You're going to be all right," she said. I nodded. "I think so," I said softly. After she left, I stood in the doorway for a long time. The quiet felt different now, not empty, just peaceful. I thought about everything that had happened, all the hurt, all the fights, and all the love that survived anyway. I knew I couldn't erase the past, but I didn't have to carry it like a wound anymore. I stepped back inside, closed the door behind me. Have you ever realized that healing doesn't mean forgetting, but simply refusing to let old pain define you? If you have, you know why I took a deep breath. Stay with me. Because this was the moment I decided to live on my own terms. The next morning, I woke before dawn. I lay in bed for a while listening to the quiet. No voices, no tension, just peace. When the first light touched the curtains, I got up. I made coffee in the old percolator. It sputtered and steamed, filling the kitchen with warmth. I carried my cup to the porch. The air was cool. The grass sparkled with dew. For a moment, I just stood there. Then I walked to the edge of the steps. I bent down and touched the boards. They were rough under my fingers, but they were mine to repair. All of it was mine to care for, and that thought didn't feel heavy. It felt like freedom. I stood up straight. Have you ever realized that taking ownership of something, even something broken, is the first step toward healing? If you have, you know why I felt a quiet pride settle in my chest. Stay with me. Because that morning, I decided to start with the smallest thing I could fix. I found the toolbox in the hall closet. It was still where she'd kept it. I carried it outside, kneeled by the loose boards. For a second, I wondered if I could do it alone. But then I remembered her voice. "You're more capable than you think, Elena." I took out the hammer, fitted the first nail. The sound echoed through the morning air. Steady, sure. One board at a time, I worked my way across the steps. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and it was mine. When I finished, I sat back on my heels. My hands were dusty, my arms ached, but I felt lighter than I had in years. Have you ever done something small just to prove to yourself that you could? If you have, you know why? I smiled as I gathered my tools. Stay with me. Because that small repair was only the beginning of what I planned to build. I put the tools away, washed my hands at the kitchen sink. The water ran clear over my skin. I looked out the window at the steps I had fixed. They looked simple, ordinary, but to me they felt like a promise that I wouldn't keep living in the past, that I would build something good out of what I had left. I made another cup of coffee, carried it to the living room, sat in her old chair. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like a visitor here. I felt like this was exactly where I belonged. I closed my eyes, let the quiet fill me up. Have you ever paused to notice a moment of peace right in the middle of all the uncertainty? If you have, you know why I stayed there breathing in that calm. Stay here with me, because I was ready to keep going one small step at a time. Later that afternoon, I opened the small cedar chest in the hallway. It smelled of old lavender and dust. Inside were things she had saved, a bundle of letters tied with a blue ribbon, photographs from birthdays and quiet Sundays. I lifted out a faded picture. It was me, maybe 6 years old, standing on this same porch, a gap-toothed smile on my face, Grandma's hand resting on my shoulder. I traced her outline with my thumb, remembered the way she laughed, the way she never hurried me when I asked questions, all the parts of her that had made this house feel like a refuge. For a long time, I just held that photo, let the memories wash over me. Some were sweet, some were sharp, but all of them felt real. Have you ever found something small that brought back a piece of yourself you thought was lost? If you have, you know why I couldn't put the picture down. Stay with me. Because that memory gave me the courage to do something I'd been avoiding. I set the photo gently on the table. I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and looked at my reflection in the window. For so long I had believed their voices. Believed I was selfish, unworthy, too different to ever be loved the way I needed. I took a deep breath, pressed my palm to the cool glass, and whispered words I had never said to myself. You were always enough. The quiet held that truth. No one interrupted it. No one argued. It was just me, standing in my own kitchen, owning every part of my story. Have you ever spoken kindness to yourself after years of silence? If you have, you know how powerful it feels. Stay here with me, because forgiving myself was the most important choice I ever made. When evening came, I lit the small lamp by the couch, took out my notebook again, turned to the last page I'd written. The list looked simple, but to me it felt like hope in ink. I added a new line. Invite Mrs. Reynolds for dinner. Then another. Repair the garden fence. And one more. Write a letter to Grandma, even if she can't read it. My hand didn't shake. I felt steady, present, ready. Have you ever made plans not out of obligation, but because your heart finally felt safe enough to dream? If you have, you know why. I smiled as I set the pen down. Stay with me, because this was how I began to build a life that belonged only to me. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. The house felt still, like it was holding its breath with me. I went to the kitchen, made coffee in the old percolator, then I sat at the table, pulled a fresh sheet of paper toward me. I smoothed it flat, took the pen in my hand, and started to write. Dear Grandma, I don't know if letters can reach wherever you are, but I needed to say thank you. My hand trembled just once, then it steadied. You saved me in ways I didn't see before, not just with what you left behind, but with your faith that I could be more. I'm trying to live in a way you'd be proud of. I paused. Let the words settle, then I kept going. I hope you know I loved you more than I ever said out loud. I hope you felt it. Have you ever written to someone who couldn't answer just because your heart needed them to hear you? If you have, you know why I signed my name with tears in my eyes. Stay with me. Because that letter felt like closing a door gently without bitterness. That evening, I took a walk. The sun was low in the sky. Golden lights spilled across the front steps, the ones I had fixed myself. I stood there for a while, watched the shadows stretch across the yard. The quiet felt different now, Not heavy, not empty, just peaceful. I thought about all the years I spent trying to be accepted, all the ways I tried to earn love that should have been given freely. And I realized something simple. I didn't need it anymore. I had love. I had memory. I had this house that felt like a promise kept. Have you ever watched the sun go down and felt something settle in your heart, like a truth you'd been waiting for? If you have, you understand why I closed my eyes and smiled. Stay here with me because this was the sunset that finally felt like an ending I could trust. The next morning I woke with a sense of calm, the kind that doesn't ask for permission, the kind that just is. I made breakfast, sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, looked out at the porch steps and the garden I would soon restore, and I felt ready, ready to begin again, ready to live without apology, ready to build something lasting from all the pieces they tried to break. I picked up my notebook one last time, wrote 4 simple words at the bottom of the list. This is my life. Have you ever reached a day when you finally believed that? When you knew no one could take it away again? If you have, you know why I took a deep breath. Why I felt a peace I'd never known. Thank you for walking this journey with me. May you find your own freedom and never doubt you deserve it.